difficulty dealing with people that want to take you down? You'll learn how to handle those people today on Zola Levitt Presents.
We're so glad you've joined us today on Zola Levitt Presents. I'm David Hart.
I'm Kirsten Hart.
Jeffrey Seif.
We are in our series, Warrior King, all about King David. And today we'll be discussing King David's relationship with Saul. It wasn't a good one.
Pretty rough.
He ran for his life from this
Well,
guy.
like your husband said, it was rough and tough and tumble. David was anointed king, but Saul thought he already had the job. And you can see how that thing is setting up. Don't we all have problems, David, in our relationships with people? Or don't a lot of us, anyway, have that difficult person there in our web?
Sometimes we think we have it so bad, but then we hear about people like David, what he went through.
Maybe we can learn how to get the better of it today.
I believe so. In fact, right now, let's go to our dramatic reenactment and teaching from Dr. Seif.
It had happened before to King Saul. A dark, evil spirit had settled on his soul once again, leaving him utterly distraught. David meant well in playing a tune, but it did little more than further torment the troubled king. David was gone for now, but the evil spirit remained, taunting him without mercy.
I am sure that it was extremely painful for David. And I want you to get the point as well. And why is that? Because it can be extremely painful for us. And what's that, pray tell? When we are not only abandoned by friends and associates, not only disappointed, but out and outright betrayed. It's tragic. Sometimes there are people, we serve them well, in response to which we get not just disrespected, but they unleash forces upon us that look to knock the legs out from underneath us. Sometimes we can take our friends and weigh them in the scales, and they can come up wanting. And why is that? Because much as we try and love them, they come after us with a vengeance. And that's tragic, isn't it? That we have to be on the defensive, that we have to be on the ready against friends, people that we serve, people that we've loved. That's where the warrior King David, well, he's not a king yet, but that's where he finds himself. And maybe this is his training on the way to be the king. What do I mean by that? You know the story. David entered into a world against the backdrop of Saul's demise. Saul was vested with authorization to be the king, to lead the people, but he wasn't leading the people, he was bleeding the people. He was feeding off of them instead of feeding them. And why is that? Well, it was all about the house of Saul. It was all about him benefiting from the position that he had instead of using his energies to be of a benefit to the community. Well, God finally says, I can't work with this man anymore. He just won't repent. He's not teachable. So the word to Saul from the prophet Shmuel is enough already. The Lord went to someone else, David, and he found in him some stock that he could raise up and use. Now what's interesting, part of David's being raised up was him to have this titanic struggle with the man that he began serving. And isn't that tragic? I don't know if you've ever found yourself in a place where the world has turned on you. Here we're in a home where there's some love, people working together. And you've heard the expression that a man's home is his castle. And the reason why that is sometimes the world outside can be so very precarious, very tumultuous, so we retreat into the confines of our own home. But what do you do when your own home, when your own safety zone turns on you? David had that happen. His whole world turned upside down. He learned to rely on God. But the same God that he was relying upon was the one who was counted upon to send the troubles. If you look in 1 Shmuel chapter 19, we're told in verse 9, Rvatihi ruach Adonai ra'a el Shaul, and an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul. I don't know that God's in the business of dispatching demons. The point is the Lord allowed it to happen. And so why is it that the Lord allows bad things to happen to good people, or why he allows his people to have bad people assault them? Well, we learn to trust in him, to be sure. It seems to me that if we're going to be champions, we have to learn to bear underneath difficult burdens and weights, and that makes us in the process. David was a king. He had to learn his craft, learn about trusting in God, learning about how God can deliver from bad people and bad circumstances. David learned that, and he became the warrior. He was forged in the furnace of affliction. There were many things that David learned, by the way, because of the difficulties that he experienced, difficulties that served him well. And I want you to know that the difficulties that you experience in life, if you're walking with the Lord, can serve you well as well. And why do I say that? Because Scripture says that all things, even Saul things, says all things work for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. I have a Saul in my life, one or two to tell you the truth, and you probably do as well. But you know what? If you have the Lord in your life, that's plenty good to get the better of life's challenges. It's easy to feel alone, isn't it, sometimes when you feel you're running away from people's spears? But that's not all the story with Saul and his family. I think you know, if you read the Bible, you learn that Saul had a son, Jonathan, a man, a different sort altogether. It's interesting, inasmuch as Saul was hell-bent on destroying David, David had endeared himself not only to Jonathan as a best friend, a great friend, we're going to look at him in a moment, but not just that, but even Saul's daughter fell in love with David. Go figure. An upside-down world, isn't it? And sometimes an upside-down world is the kind of world that God uses to get his people right side up. And so when we look at the story of our warrior King David, we learn about Davidic leadership in Goliath-like times, and we learn how he used difficulties to make that man who he was.
David and I had become the best of friends. Despite my father's attempts to have him slain, David remained intensely faithful to the throne. Our friendship had now become the one link that kept him alive. We laughed together, perhaps in doing so, hoping to forget my father's rage. David asked me to be loyal and kind. I agreed, knowing I could never find a better friend, one who, in the future, would replace my father as the King of Israel.
The word fraternity comes from the Latin word frater, which means brothers. And as you may well recall from the biblical text, Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad, behold how good and pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in unity. So you might recall that people need people. Yeshua, Jesus, is on record saying, by this all men will know that you are my disciples, by your love for one another, by your fraternity. When I think of the story of David and Jonathan and David, I'm reminded of a relationship there that to me is just fantastic. And by the way, it's rare amongst men these days, outside of the theater of combat, I should say. Men go off to war, men forge bonds. When men struggle together against a common foe. I never served in the Army, but I have a career in law enforcement. I know that there's a kind of fraternal bond amongst men who bear arms in defense of home and hearth in the police force, that there's a lifelong bond that cops share. And by the way, it's all over the world. I can go to another continent and talk to a cop about cop stuff, and we are instant buddies. There's something about braving the same kind of hazards that forms bonds. And men need those bonds. Tragic, outside of war. Males develop relationships in war, where they learn to work together. We cultivate skills on reliance, responsibility, and then we leave that world and go into civilian life, and it's every man for himself. And there's something in that. Males feel something missing. There's a vacuum. There's something that needs fixed. And why is that? Because a man is alone, and men were not made to be alone. Strange as that might sound, there's a void in the heart that men have that can't be filled by a woman. Now, I know I can be misunderstood in saying that. It wouldn't be the first time, and I can get bad mail. Oh, I don't believe it, but it's true. Men need men. Now, I think it's problematic. Ain't it like the devil to sexualize that? I think that indeed is problematic. When I look here in the sacred text to see about the sacred bond between men, let's not even think of sexualizing that. I believe the Bible legitimizes relationships between Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. But I want you to see this. In Shmuel, 1 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 16, Vayikrot Yonatan im Beit David, and Jonathan made a covenant. Karat Berit, he cut a covenant. He made a covenant with David. And we're told in verse 17, and Yonatan caused David to swear for the love that he had for him. For he loved him as he loved his own soul. I believe there's a longing for that, by the way. I believe there's a need for that. I can't tell you how, as a police officer, I would love just to sit around in uniform with other men. Maybe there was a fight, there was an incident, something we work together to break up, and then there's a kind of camaraderie where we connect and we process what happened. And oh, for the joy of that. And to me, it's tragic how that's missing outside of that culture. You know, I've had some experience serving as a firefighter as well, where we debrief, you don the bunker gear, you know, most people are smart enough to run from a fire, some people are dumb enough to run into it. But I say that tongue in cheek, of course, they're not dumb, they're heroes. The point is that when people work together in a common cause and a common struggle, it forges alliances that wouldn't otherwise be there. And we need that. I believe that God's people need to recover that. The Bible says, Hine ma tovu manayim sheverachim gam yachad. How good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell together in unity. Hear me, mister, you might have a lot of talent, but you are not going to excel. You're never going to reach what you could otherwise be if you forever want to go it alone in life. Find good friends. Cultivate those bonds. Be faithful to each other. David and Jonathan did that. It's a moving story. Never mind my words. Read the Bible itself and learn how David was the better for his associations with Jonathan.
אני נשבע. אחי אתה.
Our resource this week, a Christian love story, booklet, and CD. Read and listen along to the beautiful story of the wedding customs of Israel in Messiah's time and how he fulfilled these traditions, calling out his bride, the church. A striking and inspiring example of scriptural logic and elegance. Contact us and ask for a Christian love story, booklet, and CD. If you're a longtime viewer of Zola Levitt Presents, then you're probably a longtime supporter. And I just want to say thank you, as you know how important your donations are to keep this ministry on the air. If you're a new viewer, I'd like to talk to you for just a moment. It's very important that you remember that the only way that we can stay on the air is through your donations of support. Please remember us monthly, and thank you.
Thank you so much for your donations and your support of Zola Levitt Presents. We get to do what we do here on the set and around the world because of you. Now let's go back to Israel to our dramatic reenactment where we see the demise of Saul, and then we get to hear more teaching from Dr. Jeffrey Seif.
It was a slaughter field. Never before had King Saul ever witnessed such carnage. The Philistines had killed his 3 sons, and now, in the last moments of this hopeless battle, the wounded king pleaded for his own death. Loyal to the end and gripped with fear, his armor-bearer refused the king's plea. And so it was that Saul would use his sword one last time.
The expression to fall upon one's sword speaks of someone taking their own life. And we're at a place in David's life where he's learned that his nemesis has fallen upon his own sword. Saul is dead, and Jonathan along with him. For my money, Saul could have died a lot sooner, and that would have been okay, because the God's honest truth is I didn't like that man as soon as I met him in biblical literature, at least not long after I read him. I realized there was something wrong with that man. Jonathan, on the other hand, you just can't help but fall in love with him. I love that guy, and I say that at the risk of being misunderstood. In any case, David here is confronted with the fact that both are dead. And it's monumental in the biblical text. The Samuel text is clear that David had every reason to want to kill Saul, and he never exercised his prerogative. David's conduct is sterling. And why is that? Because he won't take it upon himself to be given to executing his superior officer in that social system. He spends 13 years not fighting Saul, but running from him. And now as he's running, he's overrun with the fact that Saul is dead. We come upon that story in 1 Samuel. Very simply, in verse 4 at the end, Saul and the armies is engaged in a clash with the Philistine, with the Philistines, and it doesn't go Saul's way. And we're told finally in verse 4, Vayikach Shaul et hacherev, vayipol olecha. Therefore Saul took his sword and he fell upon it. He was mortally wounded, and he said enough already. The battle's gone horribly. He experiences the death of his own around him. It's tragic at one level. We're told then in verse 7, very simply, Veki metu Shaul uvonav. And Saul and his sons were dead. What's interesting for my money is the way that David responded to it. As I'd said, the way I perceive it, Saul could have died a lot earlier and that would have been okay. I would imagine David could have been tempted to just breathe a deep sigh of relief, but it wasn't the nature of the guy. David, and this is really interesting, I think, and it's evident, and you'll hear David in his own words, David was mournful over it. David had been running from that man for 13 years, and you know what? God used that tough guy to grow up David. God used the Saul, he used it all. Wars with his own, wars with a Philistine, to make that man the man that he was. And great leaders are great bleeders. That is to say, we all have scars under our shirts. And they make us the people that we are. David's leadership was forged in the furnace of challenge. David made peace with his nemesis, if you will. And, you know, there's the old Spanish expression, adios, which doesn't mean goodbye. It is goodbye, but it means to God. And I think that David gave his struggles over a long time beforehand. And now he eulogizes Saul and Jonathan. I want you to hear this in 2 Samuel chapter 1. He says in verse 23, Saul and Jonathan, the lovely and the pleasant. How can David describe Jonathan and his father as the lovely and the pleasant? You know why? I mean, you can be vexed over somebody that's really been messing you up for years, but you make peace with it. And you just say, God, whatever. I think it's striking that David himself did much the same. He says in verse 26, I'm distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. David learned to forgive and give it over to God, and he was able to go on to greatness. Would that we did likewise.
I, for one, am so appreciative that God was so good to give us a Bible, a book that we can read about people's problems. I think we think we're the only ones that walk through things now in this time. And David dealt with jealousy and horrible relationship situations with Saul that
Are you
we're
talking
seeing.
about him or him? I mention that because, David, isn't it true that life, there's a continuum? We're disappointed by people to out and outright betray. Don't we find ourselves in there on more than one occasion?
I'm guilty of running and not stopping and listening to God. Have you ever done that?
Well, unfortunately, yeah, it's part of the human condition. And here David, of course, he himself is shackled by the human condition. He's not, a poster boy of perfection by any stretch. He's not Jesus Christ. But he finds himself as a man with a good heart, David with a good heart, like David Hart.
It's like a song.
And he definitely has that going for him. And he just invokes the ire of a guy who's jealous of him, who goes after him. Have you ever been tangled up with someone that just was mad at you for reasons real or imagined?
I don't know if we're supposed to do that on air. I mean, I can't name names, but yes.
No, not
that's-
names, but just
I
let's
know.
face it. I'm asking the question.
Right.
Not that I know your business, but I know the answer is going to be yes because you spend some time on the planet. I mean, it's not a lady image, but if guys took their shirts off, we all have stab marks there. We've all been wounded. You can't go through life without getting beat up a little. And here David got beat up a lot.
And I want to say, too, it happens in ministry with pastors and staff members. It's
All
sad
the
to say,
time.
but yes, we've been through that.
Yeah, people think, well, if you're anointed, then you're not going to have problems. Well, David is anointed, and look what happened to him. And by the way, Jesus is the anointed one. Look what happened to him. There are challenges in life. That's the bad news. The good news is that we know the world is difficult from the first 3 minutes of reading the Bible. It's a perfect God who makes his way into a perfect world in order to help people in it. That's Gospel 101. And when we look at the story in David, we see how God watches over his word to perform it, how God vindicates him, and how God leads David onward, difficulties notwithstanding.
And in the death of Saul, as we've seen from the reenactment today, David still loved him. David, in his ways, respected Saul. I mean, I don't think I would have been as good as David was.
To that point, I think the biblical authors go out of their way to say that David's rise to power, it's not like he undermined Saul to get where he was going, number one, and he expresses no joy at his demise. That does say something about the man.
Big.
Yeah, it does.
That's right. So much more of this to come. Please stay with us.
Shalom, shalom, Yerushalayim. Shalom, shalom, shalom. In the holy city of Jerusalem, we will pray for peace. Shalom, shalom.
You just heard about our tours that we have 2 times a year. Now, I have to introduce you to someone that just went on a tour. This is one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. This is Belinda. She does this every week, and you style our program. But you went. This was her first time. She just went on a tour.
I've been sitting here on the show working now for 7 years, and this was my first trip.
And I've got to say, she's really fun on the tour. We have, right, we have fun.
Oh, we had so
We
much
had so
fun.
much fun on the bus. We laugh.
I made 82 friends.
Oh,
You
I
know,
know.
It was wonderful.
And I've just got to I know we just have a minute, but you brought your dad's Bible, right?
Yes,
What did that
I went in
mean
honor
to
of my
you?
father. I went on a pilgrimage for him.
And did you read that Bible there?
I left it there.
Did you?
Yeah.
Tell people just real quick, why do they need to go?
I have been in Sunday school my whole life, but now Sunday school is alive. I have seen it with my own eyes. I know what it looks like, and it just came to life for me, and it was wonderful. It was a life-changing experience.
It's hard to explain it in words, isn't
You
it?
can't explain it.
I know. You've got to go
Gotta
with
go.
us. Go with us.
Save your money, give up your Starbucks, give up lunches, whatever it takes, go to Israel. You'll never be the same.
This is Belinda on our program. I love her. You're one of my favorite people ever. Now, another favorite person that we get to deal with in Zola Levitt Presents, he's at Chaim Mailspin. Let's go to him now in Israel.
Joel chapter 2. Our prophet talks about a time when the Spirit would be poured out on all flesh. Isn't that amazing? But do we understand that it's connected intrinsically to the restoration of this land? Remember in 1906 when Ben-Gurion first shows up here, he starts the Watchman movement, or what's called Hashomer, to develop agriculture here. And what happens right after that? In 1906, April 9th, the outpouring of the Holy Ghost at Azusa Street Mission. William Seymour, Richard Asbury. It was amazing. You remember the War of Independence, 1948 here, where God supernaturally protected Holocaust survivors. A bunch of militias got together and somehow we survived. Well, what happens after that? 1948 to 1952, the Latter Rain Movement. Great spiritual renewal. Six-Day War, 1967. You remember we were outnumbered 2-to-1 with soldiers. The Iraqi, Syrian, Jordanian, Egyptian armies, United Arab Forces had a huge advantage over us with military, weaponry, double the amount of tanks, 4 times the amount of aircraft, but you know we were supernaturally spared. What happens? The Jesus movement all over the U.S. from the West Coast. Let's go and look and fast forward to 70 years since the declaration of Israel. What will happen? What will God do? Let me tell you, outpouring is intrinsically linked to the restoration.
Thank you, Chaim. Chaim's a great guy, keeps an upbeat attitude in a downbeat world. Israel's a tough place, but he loves the Lord and loves the people and deals with the problems, doesn't he?
He loves Yeshua with all of his heart.
Yes.
He's on fire for him.
Yes, and he reminds me of King David, who kept a good heart in bad circumstances.
That's right.
Yes. Hope you learn from this series, from this man, David, King David. As you go now, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim.
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Our monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter, is free and full of insightful articles and news commentary from a messianic perspective. Visit levitt.com to find our newsletter, along with current and past programs, our television schedule, and much more.
Don't forget to order this week's resource by calling 1-800-WONDERS, or you can purchase it from our store at levitt.com.
Your donations to Zola Levitt Ministries help these organizations bless Israel.
Thanks again for joining us this week. Zola Levitt Ministries and this television program depend on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you.
This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.